When I woke up, they were calling me Jane Doe. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I tried to speak to tell them my name, but the word caught in my throat. My tongue felt heavy. My ribs ached with every breath. A nurse leaned over me, checking the monitor, her eyes soft with pity that didn't belong to a stranger. "Easy now," she said. "You've been through a lot, sweetheart." Her badge said Harper Quinn. She didn't know me. No one here did. And when I turned my head toward the clipboard hanging by my bed, I saw it, the words typed in cold black ink. Patient deceased. Identification pending. That's when I realized they weren't saving my life. They thought I was already gone. My name is Elena Parker, and according to every legal record in this hospital, I'm dead. I lay there listening to the machines breathe for me while the truth settled in like frost. Someone had signed my death certificate. Someone had buried me without digging a grave. I tried to remember the crash, the rain, the headlights, the voice on the phone telling me to come straight home. The details came back in fragments, like broken glass underwater. But one thing cut through the haze, sharper than the rest: my husband, Dylan Reeves. He was the last person I spoke to. He told me not to tell anyone about the inheritance. Now I understood why. They hadn't just tried to kill me on the road. They'd erased me from the world. And as the heart monitor steadied beside me, one thought burned louder than pain, louder than fear. If I'm already dead, there's nothing left to lose. The first thing I asked Harper for was a mirror. She hesitated, probably thinking I wanted to check the damage. But I didn't care about the bruises or the bandages. I needed to see proof that I was still here. My face was pale lips, cracked eyes, hollow. I looked like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead. Maybe that's what I was now. Harper said the doctor would be in soon, but I barely heard her. My mind was already running ahead, chasing the question that had started gnawing at me the moment I saw that clipboard. Who declared me dead? When Mr. Howard called 2 hours later, I thought it was a miracle. His voice had always been steady, calm, a man built from courtrooms and decency. But when he spoke this time, there was pity in his tone. "Elena, I'm so sorry for your loss." My loss. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Mr. Howard, it's me. I'm alive." Silence. Then a hesitant chuckle that chilled me. "Who is this?" "It's Elena Parker," I said louder. "You've known me for years. I'm not dead." The line went quiet for a long, long time. Finally, he whispered, "That's impossible. Your sister identified the body herself." My stomach dropped. "Lydia, she and your husband came in the next morning." He continued, confusion bleeding through his voice. "They provided documentation. We've already transferred the temporary rights of the Parker Trust to Lydia Cole under emergency guardianship." The world tilted. Guardianship. My money, my name, my life signed away by the two people I once trusted most. I hung up without saying goodbye. My pulse thudded against the stitches in my arm, but I forced myself to stand. Harper tried to stop me, but I told her I needed air. The truth was, I needed control. When I reached the front desk, I asked for my personal items. The nurse looked through a drawer, then frowned. "There's nothing listed under that name," she said. "Your husband collected them already." Of course he did. Outside the glass doors, the evening had turned cold. I could see the city lights flickering like distant fires, unaware of the woman who'd just crawled out of her own grave. Somewhere out there, Dylan was drinking to his freedom, my sister was rehearsing her grief, and a lawyer somewhere was filing my death certificate with steady, unshaking hands. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the chill seep into my skin. The reflection that stared back at me wasn't Elena Parker, the wife, or the heiress, or the victim. It was someone else. Someone quieter, sharper, stripped bare. They thought I was gone, but the dead don't stay buried forever. I left the hospital at dawn with nothing but a discharge form under the name Jane Doe and a cheap pair of scrubs Harper had smuggled me. She hugged me tight before I slipped into the back of a cab, pressing a folded paper into my palm, a burner phone and a prepaid debit card. "Don't go home," she whispered, "and don't tell anyone you're alive until you know who wants you dead." The city felt unfamiliar that morning, colder, like it was already learning to live without me. I found a small motel off the interstate, paid in cash, and locked the door behind me. For the first few hours, I sat on the floor with the lights off, trying to breathe like a living person again. My body ached, but the silence hurt worse. My entire life, marriage, family, career had evaporated overnight. I turned on the tiny TV, hoping for distraction, but fate had a cruel sense of timing. There it was, my name across the bottom of the screen. Elena Parker, heir to Parker, Trust confirmed, dead after tragic crash. They'd used an old picture, the smiling one from Dylan's company gala, a woman confident, oblivious, about to die. The reporter's voice droned on. Her husband, entrepreneur Dylan Reeves, issued a brief statement expressing his grief, while her sister Lydia Cole is expected to assume control of the estate until legal matters are resolved. I almost laughed. Grief. Dylan had never been able to fake emotion that well when I was alive. By noon, the shock curdled into something darker. I needed to see them, the people burying me. Harper had told me not to go near them, but the idea of watching my own funeral was too tempting to resist. 3 days later, I stood across the street from St. Catherine's Church, hidden beneath a black coat and sunglasses. The sky hung heavy, swollen with rain. Through the open doors, I saw the casket surrounded by lilies I would have hated. Lydia stood at the front, crying into a silk handkerchief, her husband Ethan's arm draped around her shoulders like a victory banner, and beside them, wearing a perfect black suit and an expression of tragic dignity, was Dylan, my husband. The man who signed my death. He placed a white rose on the casket and bowed his head. I watched him long enough to see the smallest flicker of a smirk on his lips as the cameras flashed. Then, just as I turned to leave, I saw her Veronica Lane. Tall, polished, the woman I'd once met through Mr. Howard's firm. Now she was holding Dylan's arm, their fingers intertwined like it had always been that way. She looked out toward the street, maybe drawn by instinct, maybe guilt. And for a moment our eyes met across the distance. Her face went pale, the rose slipped from her hand. I smiled faint and deliberate, let her think she'd seen a ghost. For 3 days I couldn't stop replaying her face in my mind, that perfect, terrified stillness when she saw me. Veronica Lane, Dylan's lawyer, his fiancée apparently, the woman who'd helped file my death certificate. I didn't go after her right away. I waited. I watched. I learned. Harper had given me just enough money to disappear, but I wasn't done being invisible yet. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Decatur under a false name, the kind of place where the neighbors didn't ask questions as long as you paid rent on time. I spent the next week scouring the internet at a public library, tracing the names that had haunted my crash report. Lydia Cole, Dylan Reeves, and one recurring entity, Cole Ventures LLC, Ethan's company. Every trail led back to the same web of signatures and shell accounts. Ethan had funded Dylan's startups for years. Lydia's name appeared on joint transfers, and Veronica's firm, Lane and Mercer, had handled the paperwork for my inheritance. They'd built an entire ecosystem around my death, so I decided to walk straight into it. I showed up at the Marlowe, a bar on Peachtree Street where Veronica was known to have her Friday night martinis. I waited until she was halfway through her second drink before sitting across from her uninvited. She froze, staring at me like she was seeing an apparition crawl out of her conscience. "Elena," she breathed. You're supposed to be," Deadeye said softly. Apparently everyone thinks so. Her eyes darted around, checking if anyone else could hear. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I replied. "Not if you knew what they were planning." She looked torn, fear and guilt twisting beneath her calm facade. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Dylan said he said you left him, that you crashed the car, drunk, that he was trying to protect the estate." "Protect it from me?" She flinched at the bitterness in my tone. "Ethan was behind the paperwork," she said. "He paid for everything, even the hospital forms. But Lydia, she was the one who handed me your signature samples." My chest tightened. "My own sister." Veronica nodded slowly, regret flashing across her face. "They told me it was temporary, a legal restructuring. I didn't realize I was helping them kill you twice, once on the road, once on paper." I leaned closer, my voice low but sharp. "Then help me undo it." Her hands shook slightly as she reached into her bag, pulling out a flash drive. "Everything's here, emails, contracts, proof of payment. Ethan used Cole Ventures to transfer funds to Dylan 2 days before your crash. It's clean but not invisible. You can use it." I stared at the drive, the tiny object that could destroy everything they'd built. "Why are you helping me now?" "Because if you go down," she said, "I go with you. And because..." She hesitated, her expression softening. "He lied to me, too." For a moment we sat in silence, two women bound by the same betrayal. Finally I took the drive and stood. "You'll hear from me soon," I said. Veronica caught my wrist before I could leave. "Be careful, Elena. Ethan doesn't make mistakes twice." I looked her dead in the eye. Neither do I. That night I opened the files. Transaction histories, Email chains. Dylan's name signed over and over like an obsession. At the bottom, one message chilled me. Transfer confirmed. Accident scheduled, EC. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark, my reflection faint in the screen. They had killed me once. The next time I'd make sure it was their turn. It began with a single letter. Veronica filed to reinstate my legal identity in Fulton County, attaching proof of fraud and survival. The clerk froze half the Parker Trust within 48 hours, and Ethan Cole noticed. By morning, Atlanta headlines screamed, "The dead heiress returns." My face pulled from security footage went viral. Talk shows called me delusional. Lydia staged a press conference, eyes wet with practiced grief. She wasn't well. She lied. Veronica told me to keep quiet, but silence had failed me once. I entered the courtroom in black and let every camera record me. Gasps ran through the gallery. Lydia's smile slipped for a heartbeat. Ethan sat beside her composed until Veronica stood and laid out our case-falsified death certificate, bank transfers, communications, witness statements tying Dylan, Ethan, and Lydia together. Ethan sneered desperation, but then Veronica played the buried recording. Dylan's voice said, "The payout comes after it's done right. No body, no questions." Ethan's voice answered, "Relax. It's handled. She'll never see it coming." The room froze. Lydia's hand fell from her pen. The judge looked hard at Ethan. His protest that the tape was fabricated dissolved as officers approached and led him away. Lydia rose, sobbing my name like a child, and I watched her unravel. Reporters swarmed afterward. Veronica shielded me with her coat and whispered, "It's over." Rain started to fall, but I knew people like Ethan didn't simply vanish. They adapt. Justice was one thing. Revenge was another. I hadn't come back just for a verdict. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. The court froze all of Ethan and Lydia's assets pending a full criminal investigation. Mr. Howard reinstated me as the rightful owner of the Parker Trust, and just like that, I was alive again, at least on paper. But resurrection has a price. 2 nights after the hearing, Veronica and I sat in her office, surrounded by boxes of evidence, half-empty coffee cups, and silence. The city outside hummed with traffic, but in that room, time felt still. "They'll appeal," she said finally. "Ethan's lawyers are already drafting motions." "I know," I replied. My voice sounded different now, lower, steadier, like it had shed the softness I used to wear. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You could leave, you know. You've got enough money to disappear for a lifetime." I looked at her, then out the window where rain streaked down the glass like veins. Disappearing didn't save me last time. Her phone buzzed on the table, a message from a private investigator she'd hired. She opened it, then froze. "Dylan Reeves," she read quietly. "Suicide in county jail." Left a note claiming Ethan was behind everything. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Not from grief I'd buried that long ago, but from the strange satisfaction of hearing the inevitable. Dylan had always been weak. Guilt was the first real thing he'd ever felt. I turned to Veronica. "Then it's just Ethan and Lydia now." She met my eyes. "What are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," I said, and smiled faintly. "But I am planning to buy something." 3 months later, Cole Ventures was auctioned off in pieces after the investigation drained its capital. Through a holding company registered in Nevada, Phoenix Holdings LLC, I purchased every last share. Ethan Cole's empire now belonged to the woman he'd tried to erase. Lydia tried to reach me once, a voicemail full of apologies and excuses. I didn't delete it. I just never called back. Veronica joined me for the final signing at the bank. She poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one toward me. "You did it," she said. "No," I corrected. "I rebuilt it." We clinked glasses. The liquid burned down my throat, warm and clean. Through the office window, Atlanta stretched endless and bright, the same city that once watched me die. "They buried me once," I said quietly. This time I buried them back. Veronica's lips curved into something like approval. "So what happens now, Elena?" I stared at the papers, the new company name embossed in silver. Now I exhaled slowly. Now I live exactly the way they feared I would. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, low and certain. And for the first time since the crash, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole.